Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello, and welcome to episode 78 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. This is a podcast about all things flying, aviation, and, well, midlife to some extent. My name is Chris Moran, the OG Midlife Pilot on YouTube and this podcast, and joined tonight by multiple other friends and guests and hosts, and not joined by one, which is why I'm here tonight. To my right, your left, from deep in Portlandia on the nation's best West Coast is Tedder. Good evening, sir.
Hey, nice to see you.
It's nice to see you as well, and to be seen. And below me, in the typical southern position of the great Nashville Music Row, deep in the heart of it, the one and only producer extraordinaire, Brian Siskin. Good evening to you, sir.
What's going on, Chris? I'm so glad to have you here. And it's kind of like a little bit of a family reunion. And it's been fun to see everybody's reactions already in the chat. We're already very confused. We miss you, Ben, but this is going to be a good one.
It's going to be fun, and I'm glad to be here. And if you're watching this, you know that, and I'm going to use the term we collectively. So the collective podcast, we record these shows on Tuesday evenings every week, generally at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 Central, or 5 p.m. where Ted is on the West Coast. And you can catch these live on YouTube on the Midlife Pilot Podcast YouTube channel. And of course, the audio podcast is a wonderful audio production and is available at Apple and Android and Spotify, and really anywhere that you get your podcasts, you can find the audio version of this. And we would like you to do that. Well, this is fun.
Chris, are you, I know that you haven't necessarily been flying a lot, and we'll talk more about that, but is it one and the same? You going back up in like a 150 after maybe a month or two away and introducing this podcast? Are those things in sort of a parallel?
Yeah, they kind of occupy the same process in my mind. So, I have not flown as much as I'd like. Really, I was telling you guys earlier, I have 0 hours in the last 30 days, but I did fly 2 hours in April, which is more than I had flown for a while. And it was very much 1 hour in a 150 and the others in 5-2 Lima, the 172 I trained in. And, it's fine. It just kind of happens how it always does. And, yeah, it's kind of like that with this podcast. Like, you guys have this, they've gotten behind the scenes. Here's some making the sausage for everyone. Like, they've got a really kind of elaborate spreadsheet now. And I'm like on this shared Google Drive. And as I opened it up just before we went on the air, I'm like, I know how to say all these things. I don't need to read this. And so I just put it away over here. But yeah, it's very much the same thing.
Well, but not really, because for the, how many episodes did we do before you decided to do better things with your life? We did 40 or 50,
41,
somewhere in there.
And I can say this now. Maybe it's better I say it now than then. Maybe people could sense it then, but I'll just say it now. We had no real idea what we were doing. And we were just kind of winging it, and it worked out and it grew, but I remember vividly, texting you 30 minutes before we're going live and just saying, I think we should talk about this. And you would just go, okay, cool. And then that was it. And then we would just go and talk about it. But that was really the impetus for how we even got started doing it, was because we just had so many great conversations, and we just thought, well, what if we tortured other people with these conversations and see what happens?
It's been fun to watch too. I mean, since I stepped away from the podcast, it's been fun to watch the community, not just you guys. I mean, there's this inner kind of core of people that I was close to before that had followed my channel when I was training, and then came up kind of behind me, like hours behind training. And then, so I finished my private and I was like, yeah. And then like I watched you guys get your certificates and it's like, yeah, that's awesome. And then I kind of like went in this trajectory, and now I'm watching all these guys just blow by an hour count and ratings and all of the things that are happening, and the big community, like even beyond like our kind of the core original OG group, but like just watching this Discord and all of the folks in this, in the greater Midlife Pilot community, like it has been crazy to watch. Like I feel like I'm stuck in a time warp. Like I could look back at my logbook and I think I'm still at like, I don't know what I told you before, 200. I'm still at like 220 hours, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, some of you guys have like doubled and tripled that, or more since I, kind of backed out a little bit, but it's so fun to watch, everybody's progress.
Well, we did an episode recently about comparison, and I've also made a video about that. It's been a really common thing that I've observed in aviation that I always feel like is a bad, influence, or just it's a gateway to a bad experience, right? And what I think is cool is that you are very comfortable with what you've done and what you've not done, and even you can look at what people have done to go quote unquote beyond you or past you and just celebrate them and be in awe of it. It's not like you're in some place where you feel like, oh, the world's, aviation people have passed me by or something. It's like, That's not where we need to be as midlife pilots, and it doesn't matter.
No, exactly. And I think it's, I said when I left the podcast full time that I've kind of found there's a whole other part of aviation that I'm involved with, between the flying club that we started here that's now at like 46 members and 3 planes. And I'm still on the airport authority locally here. So I'm kind of, helping to run the local airport, and just there's so much other stuff, or I'm still at the airport a lot. I'm not flying as much, but I'm still just around it. And I have come to terms with it. I struggle with it still sometimes. Like, it seems like, man, I put so much time and effort. I remember when it was all I wanted to do every moment of every day was study and like go get in an airplane, until I got my certificate. And it was hard originally. I struggled with this idea that, did I waste my time? Was this a waste thing? But I'm completely content now to be if I could get to 4 or 5 hours a month, like I think my long-term, like forever more goal, like that's all I need or want. Yeah. Or if we have a trip somewhere we want to take or whatever, and it happens there, like that's fine too. Like, I don't think it has to be, it's not going to play out the same for everybody, Yeah. Who knows what it'll be when I finally retire and have a lot of time on my hands, but maybe I'll fly more then. But like, I'm completely content just being around aviation. I'm still in it. I still watch tons of content and I read all the time, and I'm in it all the time. So, yep.
Yeah. It's not really a purity test. It doesn't make, it's like the hours that you flew per month doesn't make you more or less of a midlife pilot. Right. And, it's okay to have other interests and have other things in your life, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
For sure.
So the club has been going well.
Yeah, it's booming. We're kind of here. I'll tell you what's been fun to watch about the club. So we've intentionally, we're not a flight school. We make it very clear as required by the FAA. We've talked about this on the show before. We're not a flight school, but we do let student members train in our club airplanes with flight instructors who are approved by the club. And what has been the most fun to watch, like we've had 2 more folks come in starting with 0 hours. They got their private pilot certificates in the last 3 weeks. So that's 2 more. We're probably up to 7 or 8 or 9, maybe 10 now that have come through the club and have gotten their certificates. And so we've tried to manage it in that way where we have, 5 or so students at a time and the other 40 are full-time pilots, just to try to manage kind of the airplane's demand and the instructor's demand. But it has been really fun to watch people start with 0 hours and then get their certificates and then stay in the club as private pilots. And now they have planes that they've already flown that they just keep flying. Right. But yeah, it's going really, really well.
And in a club that's meant to have people fly it, it's not a school that happens to rent to private students.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Chris Moran is asking here, how many planes and how many members in the club? He said 46 members.
Yep, 46 members, 3 airplanes. We have a 172, a 150, and my Cherokee 235 is in the club. If we use the word 46 members in air quotes, there are 46 members. Not even half of them fly with any regularity, but they can. They're certificated and full-on members that can fly when they choose. It's just like anything else. They keep their membership because it's a small price to pay for access to 3 airplanes at a moment's notice, if you want one.
Yeah.
So it's really about half, I would say, of that number are flying with any regularity.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that was one of my greatest challenges, getting my certificate. And then it's like, okay, what are you going to fly? I can't keep paying these exorbitant flight school rates. I need something with a little bit more freedom, but you can't find any real opportunities around here very well. So anyway, but with enough perseverance and ill-advised expenditures, one can solve just about any problem. So real quick, I just would like to shout out, we have one new Patreon member, and that is Craig at the Hershey Bar level. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so thank you very much, Craig, and for all those that have been joining in at the different levels lately. And I will say, I was just telling Chris earlier, before we came online, is that one of the things that's really evolved in the Patreon Discord community that we have is that there's essentially there is a whole other subset of programming that is going on because people are self-organizing and doing check ride debriefs. We just welcomed a new patron from Germany, and there was a call with him, video call inside Patreon to see what the differences were between flying here and flying there. And so there's just all kinds of things that maybe aren't necessarily right up the alley of a sort of meandering podcast like we like to do, but actually focused things going on in the Patreon. So anyway, thanks for joining in, for all the community for keeping it, happening. And I will actually take a quick second to say that, our friend, CFI Erica of Aerosafe, she just launched her Patreon. So you guys can go and check that out and, check out her, weather-based content that is just getting better all the time. So
cool.
Anyway, just, if you don't join our Patreon, join hers. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so also, just if people want to support the podcast, it means a lot. You can also do one-time PayPal drops from the midlifepilotpodcast.com website and all of that. Now, before we get into anything else, I just want to say before I forget, and I don't think you've seen this, Chris, but Ted, I was kind of talking to you about this. Your latest video that I think you posted it today.
Yeah.
The Copalis Beach landing, your second time there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I don't, I don't understand.
The first time I went there,
you're flying in a video game that I don't have access to. It doesn't, it's insane.
I have the terrain add-on, the terrain DLC.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made mistakes when I went out there the first time and got corrected by the state airport manager. And
really?
So yeah, and so that video doesn't exist online, and that's fine. Make sure to read. When there isn't a runway, it can be unclear where the runway is and where the runway ends. So we had a good chat. I met him. Just happened to be going to an aviation event and met him after that. And then I dropped him an email. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to try to get down there a couple weekends ago," and he, told me, "Yeah, everything seems fine." Had reports of the whale that was there that may or may not be there anymore, and that was it. So, yeah, I went out there. Really nice weather. Better weather than the first time. The first time there was like this haze over the sand. So once you got down to about 2 feet above the runway, you kind of lost all your forward vision. And this time it was just totally clear. And so I had a great time, just landing. And
So was this airport manager guy like, oh, great, you're coming back?
yeah.
Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, what are you going to do this time?
Yeah, exactly. So, but
did he
beach landing?
Did he frown upon the fact that you were blasting Ride of the Valkyries as you were coming in?
Yeah. No, he was a nice guy. It was really nice to meet him. And an official
took the
beach
handcuffs
landing.
off.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah. Paid my fine, gave some blood, all that. It's funny because when I'm getting there on my display, it has the runway that it shows, but it thinks there's a real runway underneath you because it's charted as if it was a runway. Oh. And so it's like, well, it kind of is, but there's nothing there, right? It's just a big expanse of sand that you're landing on. So, I did better this time because there's no cues for how far off the ground you are. There's no stripes. There's nothing that kind of converges as you're coming to it. So,
what were the people doing that you were trying to avoid flying over on short final? What were those people doing?
Oh, they're just walking the beach. Yeah.
How dare they when you're trying to land on the beach?
It's a pretty remote area out there, but there are some vacation houses and stuff. But there were two other people that weren't visible that actually came up to me and knew a bit about aviation, and they were happy to see the plane and kind of talk and figure out what the beach airport is all about. But yeah, it was a cool experience.
Do you know about the cargo cult?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The literal definition of the cargo cult. Yeah.
By the way, that? Chris, have you missed this? I mean, just me going off on tangents.
Yeah. I was just thinking to myself, we were just talking about a beach runway, and now this has happened. So yeah, go please, but by all means, this break, just like old times, it warms my heart.
Seriously, the whole cargo cult thing is fascinating. It's basically a remote island, plane, I guess crashed there or landed there or something, and then this whole culture, they thought it was sort of a spirit that had come down from the another world, and they worship it, and so all the iconography and everything is all this aviation plane shape stuff that this primitive culture was inspired by. And I was just thinking that maybe that's what when you're coming in to this remote island. I just thought maybe you go back there in 10 years and they've all got little CTLSs on sticks.
Exactly. I just like airdrop cargo. Yeah.
Or it's how Lost starts, except it's a much smaller, the show wouldn't last as long. Maybe what's the story here? It's like, well, here's this one dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Beach.
Or is he?
Yeah.
I never watched that show. Did you watch that show?
Yeah, we watched it after the fact. We didn't watch it live. Speaking of tangents, do you remember that when we used to do this? We are just now watching The West Wing for the first time in our lives. We're in season 5, and man, that's a good show. Anyway, talk about things you haven't watched. When that thing was filmed, the first 2 seasons, they were still 4:3. They hadn't went out to 16:9 resolution yet. So that tells you how old that thing is.
I always think that's weird when they
480 lines. Yeah.
They did not adapt it. Thank goodness. Because people miss that too. Like, boy, you don't know what you're missing. I mean, it was cinematographically shot for this to be the frame. And when they go in and make it wide and you lose the top and bottom, it's like, somebody worked hard on that framing, right? Brian. I mean, that was man.
No, it's awful. It's kind of like when you post something on Instagram by accident and it, like, you know what I mean? Like where it just reframes it for you. But the worst is Seinfeld on Netflix.
Oh, really? Did they crop it in?
Yeah. And it's not like you have an option of choosing. So, look, there's a lot of indignities in the world, but that is probably up there.
Hey, welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, the podcast all about aviation and flying, but also TV show reviews and cinematography tips.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how we started. And that was also a lot of what we were into, was just this idea that we had a lot of common interests. And so, and to kick it right back to you, Chris, music has always been a thing that sort of we were connected by, and you've been doing a lot of that.
Yes, a lot. Super fun. So here's the Cliff Notes. I was a trumpet major in college, didn't graduate, got out of music for a long time, but recently have started with my buddy here in Fairmont. We started a community group, a community band for everybody. It's like 80 members big. We play 2 seasons a year. And then I started another one last year for our first season that is an advanced symphonic band. And I'm also playing French horn in the Monongalia Symphony Orchestra this season. So a lot. That has taken... I have definitely taken I've traded my aviation time for the music time here in the last couple of years, but it's been really cool. It's been a lot of fun.
Everything's trade-offs, isn't it?
Yep.
Especially at this stage in life, it's hard to have a lot of obsessions unless you're Ted, and then you figure it out.
You could have time and money for these things. And both of those are scarce commodities.
But I do really like the, just the idea that you're comfortable enough you understand enough about proficiency and currency and what the differences are. And that you're not really proficient, but at the same time, you built such a strong foundation by flying as aggressively and pursuing it as aggressively as you did, that it doesn't take you a long time to get back, to get the
Yeah. And here's the other thing I'll say about proficiency. I had this discussion with someone at the airport in the last couple of weeks. So I think there's more to proficiency than how we normally talk about it, which is kind of the skill sets, the stuff that definitely does kind of fade away when you're not doing this all the time. So there's some of that, but I think there's a counter argument to be made for how I would say that I, counterbalance maybe a lack of proficiency. So here's a good example. So I do not ever take a chance. And by not take a chance, I mean, I find reasons not to fly a lot of times that probably aren't even valid reasons not to. But in fact, they gave me a hard time. I went to the airport this weekend to fly and came home and ended up not flying. And Cecilia looked at my wife and said, "Told you." Because they kind of already predicted that I wasn't going to fly. Well, what was my reason? Well, it was getting close to dark and Fairmont's fuel was out. So I would have had to have stopped in Clarksburg to get fuel. And I'm like, I don't really want to come back. What if it's just darker than I want it to be? And so it really honestly was not probably a valid reason to not fly, but I didn't. So my argument of that is I say so I kind of balance some of the proficiency stuff out with just I don't make any decisions that are going to put me in a uncomfortable position. So hadn't flown for a long, long time, took an airplane out, did an hour by myself, just pattern work and other stuff. And then the next week took Cecilia on the 172 and went and got breakfast somewhere. But you just make good decisions. And I think, believe me, I am not saying there is not a degradation of skills and even quick decision making. I am certain that there absolutely is. Also, I think it's also a little bit it doesn't take a lot of reps to kind of get it back. At least the routine stuff, what does the sight picture look like? How, where do you round out and flare and land? Where do you, there's just a lot of the, how do you manage your airspeed? That stuff just comes back in a heartbeat.
And you're flying the same plane.
Same airplanes up. Exactly. It's the same airplanes that I've flown. So what would I do in an emergency? Is some of that less sharp because maybe I'm not thinking about it because I'm not in an airplane 40 or 50 hours a month? Probably, some of that probably is, but how do you rate that and put it in a number and figure out, am I proficient enough? You do the best you can and make smart choices and don't put yourself in bad situations. Most of these general aviation accidents and incidents start before you even get in the airplane. I mean, people have sealed their fate in a lot of cases by it's the decisions they make before they even start up. So,
well, let me ask you one other thing here real quick.
Yep.
And by the way, thank you for all that. That's actually a really interesting insight because you were, like a lot of us, very serious about the training, beat ourselves up about any mistakes that we made, really took it seriously. And we're thinking about safety and really trying to do things right from the get-go. And you're touching on something that I think whether as much as it seems like a lot of the people in this community or a lot of this audience is people are people that are just relentlessly in pursuit of more flying and flying all the time. That is not really the case. And I think that this is good timing in the way that we've had this momentum in this community, because I think there's a lot of people that fly 1 to 2 hours a month, and are just kind of keeping it together and they enjoy it, but it's not like it needs to take over your whole life. And some people do, it's so I just find it a very healthy, reasonable way to look at it. But but I do appreciate you also saying that's a double-edged thing.
It is. Haven't we talked about this before, Brian? I know you and I have. So you weigh this out. So here's the other thing you say. If you want to just look at the law of averages, I mean, if I'm flying 2 to 4 hours a month, just the predictability, the chance that a mechanical failure or something is going to happen to me is significantly greater than it is if somebody who's flying 100 hours a month. So, but how does that turn out? That person is so much more proficient than me. These are all things to weigh for sure, but you definitely, you reduce your risk. It's like anything else you do in life. If you smoke 1 cigarette a week versus 100, the odds of you having a health impact are a lot less than the other guy, the 5 packs a week. So,
well, it probably helps that you're flying a club plane as well. Your plane isn't getting 1 hour a month. And where you go to get into it, it hasn't been taken care of and all that. So, your plane is in good shape. So that's one risk that you kind of get rid of.
That's a great point.
I wanted to go back to getting into the 150 though, because you said it'd been a while since you'd flown. What did that feel like?
I love it so much.
Trying to find switches.
The 150, well, yeah, it's funny because we have changed some things in there. We got a new radio in the 150 that I hadn't used yet. So I did spend time before I even pulled it out of the hangar. Like I looked at I read the manual. I mean, I looked at the pictures and, I just made sure that I knew how to quickly toggle the frequencies, and it has a cool listen function on the standby frequency too. So you can be on one and listen to a second one on the same radio. So I wanted to make sure I knew how to do that. But yeah, no, the hardest thing for me was remembering where's the avionics master? All right, that's right. This plane doesn't have one. It's the little those details. But once you got out to you went through the other stuff and you got out to the actual operating the plane part and how things felt. I did great in the 150. It was wonderful. The 172 we did laugh. That's what I took the next week when I took Cecilia for breakfast and we went to Waynesburg, Pennsylvania, which is about a half-hour flight from us, maybe a little more. And my landing was terrible, not in an unsafe way, but just I had way too much speed, which was my old crutch from a long time ago. And we just floated forever. It's a long runway, so it was fine. But it's just man, the longer you got to fight to stay on center line and keep the thing aligned, it's come on, I just want this thing to get on the ground already. And kind of, we laughed about that wasn't my best work, but that stuff, that comes back to you, but takes a little bit more time. But the switch is absolutely just where stuff is in the plane. That's some of the stupid stuff is the hard stuff.
You're like avionics master. I am the avionics master.
I just remember that early in training where if you were gone for a week, you'd come back and you'd forget half of what you knew. And it's the longer you do it, the less of that you can afford longer gaps.
Absolutely.
That really hurt in training. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's also something to be said for those of us that maybe have been kind of keeping at it in this, last few years and, getting after it however we can. I can see, even for me, I feel I definitely like to fly at least every couple of weeks. I feel weird if I go beyond a couple of weeks, but at the same time, I don't really lose anything, because I've just been kind of building up so much. That being said, I appreciate you bringing up the idea that there's the unseen gap that you could be experiencing in your lack of currency or proficiency with just your response time to certain things and all that, just your instincts, but yeah, so, and I've been doing more, I've been wanting to save my duckies a little bit more for longer trips. So I've been kind of backing off a little bit so that I'd rather just use the plane to go somewhere really adventurous and use that expenditure, to do that as opposed to just piddling around locally all the time, just stay current. The value of that's becoming less and less to me. Although I recently did my night currency and some things like that.
That's cool.
Good to do. But yeah, hard to do in the summer around here. But real quick, I just want to change gears and read a review. And just to remind folks, you can leave us 5-star reviews only. Send the 4 stars and below directly to our mailbox for us to redline and send back to you. But Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places you can leave reviews. But here is one that I'd like to read, if you guys don't mind. Do you mind, Chris?
No, please, by all means.
Mind? Okay. And then I'd like to get everybody in the chat to come up with. We've got a bunch of stuff that we haven't even addressed in here, so maybe after we do this, we'll live in the chat for the rest of this.
I have 2 quick things after this.
Okay,
great.
Is that you just saying you're ready to go? Like you're done already?
No, I want to do all the questions, but I'm saying I have 2 things that aren't questions.
Okay.
Yes. Bookmarks.
What if Chris, what if you have nothing to lose right now? Like, what if you were just like, I gotta go.
I'm about to leave a review if you don't read this review.
All right. So it's from Banjo Pilot. It says, it's called My Flying Buddies. As someone who took to the skies a bit later in life, I can't say enough about the Midlife Pilot podcast. Ben, Ted, and Brian, sometimes Chris,
and Chris also,
have crafted an incredibly fun and supportive community for those of us who decided to chase our aviation dreams a little later. Before discovering them, the journey to becoming a pilot was a lonely endeavor filled with people who were tired of hearing me talk about airplanes. But these guys, they're like the trusty co-pilots you never knew you needed. Or had. So, all right. Episodes are packed with practical tips, hilarious anecdotes, and tons of encouragement. They've made the whole process of learning to fly feel like an adventure shared with friends. The laughs, the stories, and the genuine support have been game changers for me. Honestly, without them, I'm not sure I would have made it all the way to my check ride. If you are a midlife dreamer with your head in the clouds, this podcast is your ticket to the cockpit. Thanks, Ben, Ted, Brian, and Chris, for making this wild ride so much fun. So that is a beautifully well-written review that makes me feel very, very good because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. 2 quick things, and then we'll move on and we'll just chat our way to the end of this thing. Which you can participate in this chat if you are watching the live recordings of this podcast on Tuesday nights at 8:00 Eastern on the Midlife Pilot Podcast YouTube channel. Those of you midlife aviation geeks who are in here watching it live, or if you're listening to it later, unless you're driving, if you look at your sectional sometime when you're bored and look at my local airport where I did most of my training, you saw at the Clarksburg Airport, just south of Fairmont, KCKB, Charlie Kilo Bravo. So one day, a couple weeks ago, in our Slack channel for the Flying Club, someone posted in here and said, a screenshot and said, hey, Clarksburg's Delta airspace is twice as big as it was yesterday around.
Huh.
And I said, oh, that's got to be like, it was a 4-flight screenshot. And I said, oh, that's got to be that's just your overlay. Something's weird with the data that 4-flight got. Let me go look. I'm going to go to the FAA site and look at the actual sectional. And indeed, there was a new sectional just published that day. And I thought, well, that's a coincidence. So I downloaded the sectional. And sure enough, overnight, that morning, the airspace had changed from being like 4 miles diameter to 7.1 miles in diameter, which puts the Delta now 2 miles off of the end of the runway of our runway 23 at Fairmont on runway heading.
You got a super Delta.
So if you think about how quick you're going to be in that Delta, there were no chart notices, there were no NOTAMs, there was no communication, and we found out after the fact the Clarksburg Airport didn't know. The local ATC facility was finding out that day as well. It was all new. They had kind of buried it in a Federal Register. It had been published for comment back in December, and was open for the 2-week comment period, and nobody did over Christmas. 2 days before Christmas, they published this thing and then let it kind of sit over the holiday, and then it got anyway. It's fine. They needed to help some of the approach. Yeah, they just needed a little bit more space for their delta or whatever. It's totally fine. But so that was really interesting to know. And we were talking about being prepared and proficiency and stuff. One of the things I would say is that we quickly notified the pilots of all of the hangar attendants at the airport and our club members, because how easy would it be to start busting airspace? Because I guarantee you on our climb out of Fairmont, we've been in what is the new Delta, probably 50% of the flights where we're leaving Fairmont. And nobody would have ever, if you didn't have you should be using an updated sectional that is updated the day it is, but let's be real just for a minute. Your home airport. I mean, like if you're not going anywhere, you may not even have a chart up. So like, those things can sneak up on you. So keep an eye on the published dates of sectionals, because sometimes that stuff just happens and you don't find out about it. Thought it was interesting though.
So you take off runway 23 at Fairmont, 4 Golf 7, and then and the Delta is ground to 3,700.
Yep.
And you said that is a distance of about 2 miles?
I think it's 2.
So what is the climb rate you need to?
Well, you're not going to get above it. You're not going to get above it.
So if you were going to leave Fairmont and your destination was to the southwest, like you're trying to get to, I don't know, even if you're trying to get to Clarksburg, or maybe you're trying to get down to, what is this, Whiskey 22, Upshur County Regional, or somewhere around there. Are you just going to climb above Fairmont until you're high enough and go over? Are you just going to immediately get on with them and try to transition? Or are you going to go around? What are you telling people?
I'm probably going to get on with them and try to transition, because it would be a reasonably long way around.
Yeah.
It's 2 miles off of the end of the runway. So you don't have much time. It's fascinating. It was an interesting study in just how those things can change with nobody really being made aware of it. And
it's really crazy that like there wasn't even just like a thing by the coffee machine.
Nothing. Nobody.
So pull up your sectional and look at 7 Sierra 3. Again, 7 Sierra 3. That's Twin Oaks, Portland area, which is where I trained out of. It's not where I'm at now, but when you fly north on that one, off 02, which is the standard departure, you are kissing the Delta, and so you have to turn it. So it's left patterns. So if you're in a slow climbing plane, you need to turn crosswind early. And they've had that problem. Pilots that do that. If I want to go north from there, what you really want to do is take off and then transition through the Delta. But man, that takes some really fast radio work to do that. You've just taken off. You need to switch. Hope that they'll let you without having the ATIS, and get in on the radio to tell them I want to transition over your pattern, and do all of that. Hopefully, there's a gap in the radio traffic that you can do that, right? So I usually just go out west, circle, and take care of it then. But same sort of thing, right? Where it's like, if you're not paying attention, the Delta's right there, right? And if it's a tower that has a radar, they notice it. If you're at John Toon, you probably get away with it because they don't know where you are. So yeah.
Well, John Toon, we gotta watch. You can't. You get to 2300, 2400, you got to stop and make sure you're on with Nashville, and it can be a little crazy. Ted, because I took you and Cheryl up, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And the idea was we're going to go do a little downtown tour over Nashville, but we're going to go west first and just comfortably take our time to get on with B&A. And we flew around out west for 30 minutes, and there was not one moment where the radio stopped.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah.
To where I was like, sorry.
Yeah.
Can't do that today. Yeah. Can't talk to anybody. Yeah. I think I even got a couple of asks that probably didn't even make it through, but they'd never even acknowledged me, I don't think. Is that right? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, they didn't acknowledge. Or did they once? I can't remember. But so, Chris, we're going to need a good nickname for your Super Delta now. So,
Yeah, okay,
because
let me
Bachelor at Super Delta doesn't work. So, yeah.
Let me think about it.
Mega
Here's the
Delta.
other thing. Here's the other thing before we get to the chat section tonight. And I'm only bringing this up because this is when I do make my next video, this is going to be included in it. This is something I've noticed ever since I started my training, and I somehow managed to never work it into a video, or maybe I did. I don't even remember all my videos now, but this is a common pet peeve of mine because those of you who fly Cherokees can probably ignore this because you guys don't spend much time with your carb heat on anyway. But those of you who fly small engine Cessnas like 172s and 150s with the 0300 and 0200 engines, you talk about carb heat a lot, right? Because you use it a bunch in flight. It's on your checklist and you're in the pattern. Times use it. Okay. Here's where you never hear people talk about it. You obviously check carb heat before takeoff checks. You do your mag checks first, and then the book normally says whatever RPM you're at, 1700. Check carb heat to make sure you get an RPM drop when you pull carb heat on, make sure it's working. And then in my planes, it is pull the power back to idle and make sure the airplane runs at idle with carb heat on. The over rich lowest RPM setting it's going to be at, make sure the idle isn't set too low and it runs. All right. There's a step missing in here that I think burns people maybe sometimes even more than they realize that they're giving up horsepower on takeoff. Because this happens to me a fair amount of time when it's humid outside or when it's cold, in the winter months. Carb heat on the ground happens carb ice on the ground happens all the time in these 0200 and 0300 engines, all the time. In fact, the 150 flight we were just talking about that I took this time of year, it was April, but it was like the relative humidity it was 95% humidity, and I had not obsessively done this, but I had started up and done my stuff, taxied to my before takeoff checklist. And one thing I always do, so here's the step I do. So you do your mag checks, you turn carb heat on, make sure it operates, and I leave it on for, 10 seconds, 15 seconds even. And then I push carb heat back in. I don't bring the throttle down, because what's going to happen is if you were at 1700 when you started that carb heat check, and you put it back in and your RPM is 1900 or 2000 RPM, as it was with me in the 150 a couple weeks ago. Well, I had carb ice before I even started my mag check, because why else would my RPM have went up above where it was set before? I burned the carb ice off. Okay. So then what I do on mornings like that, or even days like that, when I know that there's a factor for carb ice on the ground, when I get out on the runway and take the runway for takeoff, I do a full static power on, put carb heat in for 5 or 10 seconds on the ground, which I don't like to do, but I do on those mornings, turn it off and then go. Because what if it's even 75 or 100 RPM? I'd like to have it rather than not on takeoff. So think about checking for carb ice on the ground before you take off, because it's a thing that happens.
Well, but before we get into One Dull Geek's comment here, I just want to say how refreshing it is that after your absence, you come back, Chris, and the thing that we're getting into is carb icing, because your videos are this is your I don't know, the monkey on your back is carb ice, I think. But by the way, before we get into also One Dull Geek's comment, I just want to say, for those who don't know about Chris's videos and how this all started, go to the Midlife Pilot YouTube channel, not the Midlife Pilot podcast. We stole his name and then moved on, as all intelligent businesses do. No,
That's capitalism.
Yeah, no, business, right?
Yeah.
The dumbest business possible. So
intelligent and business.
Yeah. So, but I just want to remind people that I still go back sometimes and watch your videos, because I don't know, I just enjoy what you made, and you made so many things, and it's kind of like a way to hang out with you when you're not around, Chris.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate that.
So if you can make another one where it's just you set up a camera across from like a diner table, and it's just you eating and looking up at the camera and just kind of nodding and occasionally laughing and stuff, and then going back to eating your meal.
That'd be hilarious. Yeah.
Right? Like eat lunch with Chris.
Well,
no, but Anyway, we'll get into One Dull Geek's comment. Ted, you want to take it?
Yeah. One Dull Geek reminded us that on Chris's BFR with the Fun CFI, that was your first time in actual, before you ended up doing the unplanned IFR approach, that you had a carb heat thing. So
that's right. Yeah. I remember that.
And speaking of going back and watching your videos, Captain Todd, let me find the original because I have the wrong one. Captain Todd said, Chris's vulnerability about fears in the cockpit in his videos helped me keep going because someone else was admitting it was scary sometimes.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what the Midlife podcast is all about, is the emotional side, right? And that we do overthink things, and that we do worry about surviving because we're not 20-year-old males anymore. Or never were 20-year-old males in some cases. So, yeah.
Or females.
Yes. That's why I said some people weren't 20-year males at any point.
There's a little bit of this kind of, I find myself thinking sometimes, I've made it this far somehow through so many little small miracles of how I didn't kill myself doing this or that time we were, rafting or skydiving or snowboarding or, and I'm not even like some extreme athlete person. I've just been living, like driving in Nashville, whatever it is, like just insane things. I've made it this far.
It's like reverse Swiss cheese.
Yeah. How much more am I trying to borrow from the bag of luck? I'm not sure. So I think there's a little bit of that, but no, I'd appreciate Todd bringing that up. And it's very much the thing that I plugged into, and the whole reason that we're all here right now is because you were doing what you were doing, Chris. And I think you were the first person to really make good content, or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, it was human, and it was relatable for people exactly like us. And you dialed right into that sentiment right away by calling it the Midlife Pilot. And so I just appreciate you very much, man, because none of us, would be in this chat right now. Maybe we'd be better off for it. I'm not sure, but no, I just really appreciate it.
Thank you. No, it was, that was my whole goal. I mean, I told everybody from the beginning, I started filming them for myself, but I really did just want to show that it was like, the struggle is real, and I still struggle with the scary stuff. And it's, I didn't want to hide anything. And I tried to do my best to I tried to just be honest, show the ugly parts of it too. And I figured if it would be helpful, if somebody else could see it too, maybe it helped me get through it, and it might help somebody else too. So that's great.
Do you ever go back and just relive your training moments or anything?
Yeah, I watch some of them. Yeah, I do. Yep.
Now, do you sort of cringe from a wow, I was so ignorant perspective, or just the video making, like you just got better and better at it, or all of the above?
Both. Yeah, both. I think some of the early lessons are super fun to watch and look at all the things that are freaking me out, that are such I'm like, this is so, it's so funny to look at it now, but it's, yeah.
Well, speaking of your videos, I've got a clip to play. I'm going to give a warning, though, that they changed the interface, so it may take me a minute to get this clip loaded.
I came into it as well with Chris Moran, and it was the original. There was a video clip where it was just fly the damn plane, or he's debating about minimums and all that. Which don't be a baby. And that spoke to me at that moment of my training, and it spoke to me many more times through that training.
Yeah. So don't be a baby. Yeah.
Yeah, just fly the plane. Yeah, that was hard words. I mean, I remember, I'll never forget the text from my instructor, Tyler Lucas, when I was piddling around about whether I was going to go on this solo flight because there was like a 4-knot crosswind at this other runway or something. And Tyler just texted me and straight up said, like, dude, you're never going to make it, meaning you're never going to get your certificate. You're never going to make it if you don't go fly this airplane today. And so I did. It was like, he was just very, he did the best he could do to make it a point. And, it was a point well taken. And you look back at it now, like, what was it even? Why was that even a factor, But at that time, it's like, I don't know. What if it's a scary 4-knot crosswind? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also, you can tell when you see that video that it's not just about whatever condition that you have created that is the supposed barrier between you and finishing the flight or doing the flight. It's more than that. That's just the nearest thing you could grab in the room to say, this is why. But it was actually an amalgam of really kind of visible and kind of what you were talking about, Ted, sort of like emotional or cerebral types of things. And it's a lot of work for us as midlife pilots to believe that we can do this when we first get started. Mm-hmm. And there is an awkward point where you get through to a certain place and then it starts getting very real. And we've talked about this before. People talk about, first solo is the biggest moment. It's like, no. The solo across countries is when it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm taking a plane to a place and then landing and then going back to another place. And that's really, and so I love that Tyler just basically pushed you off the bungee platform spiritually and just said, you're going. And he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have, obviously he knew you, respected you. And that's the other thing too, is that in your training series, you're so knowledgeable about, like I'm not even sure you had passed your check ride yet. And you're like, here's a whole 4-flight video, or like whatever. So you were so far ahead of the curve. If anything, as relatable as you were, I always felt like, and still feel like, I'm never going to know as much as this guy, or at least I'm not going to be able to articulate it.
Honestly, it goes with I am notoriously bad, and it is a fault more than it is a good characteristic of mine, is that I get into a thing and then I am into whatever thing that is at about 114%, until I'm not anymore. And then I'm into it less again. You know what I mean? So like during that time when I decided that I wanted to do that, it was about all I did, during the time that it was there. And that definitely, I need to do a better job still today, just in general, of like balancing the various components of things in life. But it was, that's kind of, I did have a head start. I talked a lot about flyght sim, online with Pilot Edge, ATC, and the other stuff that I did. I feel like all of that stuff was such a huge help in preparing me. And I had an instructor who from day one, we worked 4-flight speaking 4-flight specifically, we used technology as part of the training from day one. And I had a DPE who completely embraced it and let me use it for every single component of my check ride as well, diversions and just all of it. So yeah, a lot of that kind of went together, but yeah.
Ted, did you watch, when did you start with your midlife pilot problem?
Yeah. Problem. Yeah. Hi, I'm Ted, and I've been I started not long before the Outer Banks fly-in, and so Chris was pretty much through training at that point, and both of you guys had your tickets by then, right? But
yeah.
But that was kind of the era of Brian stressing about flying out to Outer Banks and being a long cross country, and if that's even kind of possible for you mentally, skill wise, everything else. So that's kind of when I rolled in. There's a lot of people like Cheryl who came in. I think that's the one of the places where people came in is just fly the damn plane on Chris's video. And then I think there's a lot of people that came in with landings, especially from Brian's video on that. But there's that time in training where it's like I must seek out everything because I can only get so much from my CFI. Sporties doesn't give that much information, and I can't like text my CFI 14 times an hour and say, "Give me more." And
especially if you're Tyler.
Yeah. He's a busy dude.
Yeah.
Well, so the other thing too, Chris, is that you started the tradition of this group having a fly-in by having us out to your place in Currituck, North Carolina, and that was an amazing experience. Then we had the next one in Nashville. Then we did another one in St. Simons. Then we did another one in Nashville. The clip that Ted just played was from the Saturday night gathering of the last fly-in that we just did here at the end of April. And I just want to, and that was a great commentary from Biff. So thanks for those words and for all the people that gave us some interview clips. That speaks volumes that we were walking around with a little camera talking to people at this fly-in that we wish you could have joined us, but I know you're busy and you have a lot of better things to do, or
not about better, just other things.
No, but how cool is it, Chris? Right? How like that we're walking around with a camera at this Midlife Pilot podcast fly-in, and people are talking about your videos from back then 2 or 3 years ago and how that was instrumental for them to be where they are now. And then we're talking about it. And then now we're talking about it. It's like,
yeah, it's very cool. It is cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's gotta be, I mean, you probably couldn't have named the flight, your flying club after yourself. I'm sure you wanted to. But at least this, you got to name, after yourself. You will always be the OG Midlife Pilot. Is there anything we want to get to in the comments real quick?
They've been great. I've been having such a blast reading all the familiar names and then all the new ones who came in after I left. But the conversation, this is another reason the whole community is just, I mean, some of the conversations that continued even after we would stop talking about a topic, there's just so much good stuff that happens in here. I've read every one that's went by. It's been super fun to read tonight.
My favorite thing about it, honestly, is the spirit of it. It is easily the best place on the internet that I know of for just aviation communing and conversation and getting help and all of that, because the prevailing spirit of it is all positive. There's not, I mean, sometimes I go to like Facebook and look at like the PA78 group because I want to know about
brutal. They're brutal, aren't they?
And it's just like, just that whole phenomena of just where everywhere else on the internet, you can just be like, the sky is blue. And it's like, well, not really. It's actually, it's like, okay, all right. So
that's part of why the meetups are so great is to see people in person. And with all the people that showed up, we knew everybody that was there just from Discord and from the live stream comments, right? Like, yeah, it's really cool to kind of follow everybody's journey.
Well, I never have mentioned Ben here, but Ben has been an amazing replacement for you. Not that there is a replacement.
No, absolutely. He's done a great job.
Ben has, and Ted too. I mean, it's like guys that have not done this. Chris, you and I started doing this. We already had experience doing these kinds of things. And so it wasn't that big of a jump for us to say, okay, we're just going to start doing this. Right. Whereas, Ted and Ben have really had to, they didn't get a chance to really practice for their first solo.
Right.
So yeah, it's been great. So Ted, I appreciate you. Ben, appreciate, he'll be back. He's not going anywhere.
Hey, I've got a clip to play from Ben.
Oh,
yeah.
It's a good group. And again, I had nothing to do with its creation. I'm just glad to be able to carry the torch. Shout out to Chris Moran.
Oh,
he's missed.
Heck yeah, he is missed. 100%.
Yeah, the OG. So.
Oh, that's cool.
So
looks like a great time.
I pulled that out when I was looking for that clip from Biff, and I was really happy to find
that's
that.
Cool.
So yeah.
Well, this has been fun, guys. Thank you so much for having me back.
Of course, man. Come back anytime.
I will do that. Should I do the close? Should I do the close now? Is this accurate words in here, Ted? If there's anything wrong in here, okay, that's all good.
Go for it. Yeah,
I will. I feel like I can. I'm just going to jump right back into it. Hey, thank you so much for being here for episode 78. It's been a blast to be back hanging with you guys. And here's all the new stuff that I didn't get to say when I was here before. Make sure you visit us at midlifepilotpodcast.com. You can think about joining the Patreon if you haven't yet. You can also send us a PayPal drop. That's just what the words say on here. Hey, next week looks fun too for episode 79, airplane partnerships, the good, bad, and the ugly. Yeah, that'll be exciting. I will definitely be tuning in for that one. But until then, that's it. The OG is back for one episode. Thanks again for having me. It's been fun to hang with you guys. This has been episode 78 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. And I'll be watching you guys next week. Take care, everybody.